We'll intervene whenever we decide it's in our national security interest to intervene. And if you don't like it, lump it.
The problem with America is not that we go around marauding around the world imposing ourselves. The problem with America in the last 10, 15 years since the end of the Cold War, really in the last 60 years, is that we've been too slow to get involved.
I don't know how many Iraqi civilians were killed, but I can assure you that the number is the absolute minimal that it's possible in modern warfare.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
You know, that land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
Welcome to the darkened hour.
Welcome to another episode of the Darkened Hour. And I'm with Seth Hettena. Seth Hettena is a contributing editor at Rolling Stone and a freelance journalist. He reports on politics, organized crime, and international affairs. From 1997 to 2006, Hettena was a reporter and a correspondent at the Associated Press in Detroit, Sacramento, Baltimore, and San Diego. Prior to that, he worked at two small newspapers in Iowa. He's also the author of two books, Trump, Russia, A Definitive History and A Feasting of the Spoils, and The Life and Times of Randy Duke Cunningham, history's most corrupt congressman. He also runs a weekly column at SpyTalk, where we will discuss two of his articles at length involving the FBI investigation into Saudi government funding of two future 9/11 hijackers, the Operation Encore, and the Canestraro documents revelations, as well as the current pretrial hearings of four of the 9/11 defendants at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Seth Hettena, finally, thank you very much for coming on.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, you wrote a series of articles, and one of them was the Canestraro document. It said that when this came out, it was a bombshell of a file, and I ran to the computer and basically was reading. I'd like to do chapter readings and file readings along with my audience, and I couldn't wait because I really thought that this would be a bombshell. It would be covered by the national media and alt media, and to my horror, nobody covered this bombshell. Gray Zone did, Aaron Mate, nobody from the national media. And I remember, I spoke with Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer. I spoke with Lawrence Wilkerson, the staff assistant to Colin Powell, and I was left speechless, and I still am, because here you have the CIA running an illegal operation with Saudi intelligence. Nobody covered it, Seth. And besides yourself and Dan Christensen, the Florida Bulldog, nobody touches. Why was that, Seth?
I wish I had a good answer for you. I had, it's happened to me a couple of times in my career. When I was at the Associated Press, I had some major scoops after 9/11 as well that just got ignored. And, I think there's a kind of I don't know how to say, an elitist bias in the U.S. media that information, there are some newspapers that will not run a story unless they discover it themselves or it's in one of the major competitors of theirs, such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, maybe a major U.S. daily. But sometimes, and when I was at the Associated Press, it was the same thing. It was like it didn't exist. And it's unfortunate because I don't think it helps the public. I think it's stupid, competitive garbage that inside baseball that nobody cares about outside of the newsroom. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm still stunned. And when you were one of maybe two or three people that covered this story, and I promised, I said, I want to get to them and talk with them about it, because to me, this is the crux of the 9/11 investigation and going forward as well, because I spoke with, and so have you, Brett Eagleson, and other family members that are involved with Creedler, Motley Rice, that are suing the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And I think as more time goes on, we're going to see more releases. But let's talk about Operation Encore and the Canestraro document. Now, these cases surround the operation headed under the CIA and Saudi intelligence and two known al-Qaeda operatives in Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. And in one of the articles you wrote, according to CS-23, as he's known, by the way, if I mention somebody has CS number, that means these people spoke on a condition of anonymity to Donald Canestraro, the Office of Military Commissions. And the reason why they have to speak on conditions of anonymity because they are talking about classified material. This person, CS-22, claimed that the CIA had an open file on a Saudi operative named Omar al-Bayoumi 10 years prior to the 9/11 events. And when CIA got information from the NSA regarding a high-level al-Qaeda summit meeting in Malaysia, they started their operation along with Saudi intelligence, the General Intelligence Directorate, also known as the Bahabeth, without any knowledge passed to the FBI or to the State Department at the principals meetings. You wrote extensively about this. Could you follow up on the story? What have you gotten back? And how important is this?
Well, you know, it's one of the great remaining mysteries of 9/11. You know, let me just back up and just set the stage for it. Sure. And so the audience has the full picture here. So the first two hijackers to arrive in the United States were these two guys, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. Okay. And they landed in Los Angeles right after the New Year, like February of 2000. I can't remember. No, January of 2000, right after the New Year. And they had come from a meeting in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. And they were being there. So, they were the first to arrive. And very shortly after they arrived, they were in a restaurant in Culver City in Los Angeles. And a Saudi man living in the United States bumped into them, quote unquote, and struck up a conversation. Oh, you're from Saudi. It's all in Arabic. You're from Saudi. Welcome, and invited them to come down to San Diego and help them get an apartment. Threw them a party, paid their security deposit, kind of set them up, introduced them to people, and that's all we knew really for years. That was the public record. What's come out since then and what was in the documents that I saw is that there's a lot more going on there. Mm. And what that really was an intelligence operation that this Saudi man who introduced himself at the restaurant was a kind of he was what they call a co-optee of Saudi intelligence, that he was not an official employee, but he was working for them, and he kind of like a freelancer, I guess you could say, for Saudi intelligence. And he was evidently tasked with, connecting with these guys and keeping an eye on them. That was his job. So, there was long rumor that Omar al-Bayoumi was a Saudi intelligence agent. FBI could never confirm it. Everyone, even one of the hijackers, thought he was a spy. And finally, in 2017, we only learned because Biden declassified a whole bunch of Saudi FBI documents on the investigation. The FBI confirmed in 2017, so 16 years of investigation, the FBI confirmed he was an intelligence agent. But the deeper level here is where it gets really crazy, is that people in the FBI have long suspected that not only was Bayoumi a Saudi intelligence agent, but he was being directed either knowingly or unknowingly by the CIA, who were also part of this effort. And, this is what the FBI's, contention is in these documents I found, that they believe that there was a kind of a domestic operation running on U.S. soil involving Omar al-Bayoumi and the CIA and Saudi intelligence. Now, there's a couple of things here that are important for people to know. The CIA cannot just run, the CIA can do intelligence gathering on U.S. soil, but that needs to be coordinated with the FBI. There needs to be maybe State Department led into the loop. It can't just operate by itself, because on the U.S. soil, it's very sensitive area for the CIA to operate. But in this case, it appeared the FBI agents believe that the CIA was just kind of running basically a rogue operation, that they had decided they were desperate to get an agent inside of Al-Qaeda, and they were tracking these two hijackers as they traveled from Saudi Arabia and across the Middle East into Malaysia and then to Los Angeles. And they saw it as, well, maybe we have a chance to get an agent inside Al-Qaeda. And this Omar al-Bayoumi, this guy who meets them at the restaurant, could be our way in. So that sets the stage. That's what the FBI agents think would happen. And there's some pretty good evidence, or there's some evidence to support it now.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with this, because why would the CIA have a long file on Omar al-Bayoumi that goes back many years prior to the 9/11 attacks? And when I read that, I was blown away. I was like, oh, wow, why would they basically have a file on this guy, unless they were trying to get closer to breaking Al-Qaeda's organization within the United States and elsewhere? And what I find rather illuminating was that you have FBI, by the way, you have FBI detailees working with the CIA at a place called the Bin Laden Issue Station, codenamed Alex Station. And I've interviewed Michael Scheuer, who is the chief of station there. And this station was tracked specifically to Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda around the world. And there were other agencies like the FBI, the NSA, who worked alongside one another. And, they're supposed to share all the information relating to the subject. However, it seemed almost immediately that this was not going to be the case. Scheuer and Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer weren't on the same page, because the NSA, the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, ran a program called Able Danger, which basically was a metadata collection agency regarding terrorist operatives around the world and inside the United States. CIA thought that was going to threaten their existence. The FBI and under John O'Neill from New York wanted to investigate Al-Qaeda, because they are the primary agency regarding their investigation of Al-Qaeda and terrorist affiliates because of the 1993 World Trade Center bomb. All these agencies that are basically competing with one another. And Seth, it was, did you feel that interagency infighting led to, and this is a damning charge, led to the success of the 9/11 attacks?
Wow, that is a damning judgment. Let me add some more to that and work my way through that question. So yeah, there's no doubt there was interagency competition and rivalries, and that was the 9/11 Commission's report, was let's break down these walls and fix this. But I think most people don't even, not only was there agency competition, there was intra-agency friction. And what I mean is that this Alex Station, which you mentioned, this Bin Laden unit, this just tracking Bin Laden, was kind of a weird, unit inside the CIA. And first of all, it was not an agency headquarters. It was at a remote office somewhere in Virginia. And it had its own kind of weird office culture. And there are a bunch of people. There are people who work there. They just had weird culture. I don't know how else to describe it. They would refer to themselves by their code names inside the office. Yeah. They thought them like some kind of James Bond bullshit. And like there was just this weird kind of culture there, and they went off half cocked. I don't know if you ever heard the name Robert Levinson.
Yes.
So he was an FBI agent a retired FBI agent who disappeared in Iran and is now presumed dead. You know, the Washington Post, he was working for the CIA, and it took the CIA denied this, and it took forever to kind of establish this. But he was being directed by Alex Station, and it was kind of this off the books operation. So it's not unprecedented for them to do kind of a crazy mission like this. So even CIA people who say, you know, we would never, you know, try to recruit a Saudi citizen. Well, I wouldn't put anything past the people at Alex Station because they had their own kind of way of doing things. So, you know, is it possible? Like, I mean, the implication here is that, you know, this was the best chance to stop the hijacking in its earliest stages. You arrest one of these guys, or even just pick them up for questioning. It's going to raise all kinds of, you know, they would probably have to realize their operation was compromised. Maybe they would try again, but it would certainly have 9/11 wouldn't, maybe there's a good chance 9/11 would never happen. But, you know, there were 2 FBI agents working inside Alex Station, and this is kind of the critical crux of things. Mark Rossini was one of them. James Bernard, I'm going to mangle his name, but James Bernard, I can't pronounce his name. But they were working inside of Alex Station, and they saw these cables coming across about the hijackers traveling across, and they were in Malaysia. They were watching them. It's like, well, they're coming out. They have visas with the United States. They're coming to they're coming here. We need to let the FBI know. And someone from Alex Station and a CIA officer named Michael Ann Casey, is a woman. She told them, no, you know, you're not going to say a word to FBI headquarters, you know, unless we tell you to. And they had the memo they had typed up just never got approved and was never sent. And that is the big kind of red herring, you know, the big red flag here, that the FBI agents wanted to warn headquarters. You know, these guys were sitting in Los Angeles. They had just arrived. They had no cover. They were just kind of right out there, you know, and that's the giant missed opportunity. And then months later, the CIA comes to the FBI and said, and this was like August of 2001, you know, and the hijacking is already in the works, right? And the CIA says, hey, we lost track. There these 2 guys in the United States. You should go find them. And they're like, what do you want us to do? You've known this for, you know, months. Why didn't you tell, or a year? Why didn't you tell us? And that's, you know, that is the great kind of mystery of not what I think personally what happened is there was some kind of screw up in the CIA, and they knew it. And if they admitted it, you know, it would have burned the building down. It would have, I mean, that they had dropped the ball on 9/11 would have been catastrophic for the CIA's, you know, future. It would have been broken up or renamed and reassembled. It would have burned the building to the ground. So they decided to just let sleeping dogs lie.
Yeah, this was, failure of epic proportions, so to speak. And then on top of this, Seth, you had the NSA, who had 2 open lines, and that was Bin Laden's satellite phones, and of course the infamous communications hub in Yemen. And according to Michael Scheuer, he claims that the NSA was the gold mine of all data relating to Bin Laden and Al Qaeda, because they were listening to the incoming and outgoing phone calls of both of these lines. And I can only imagine the amount of data transcripts that they possess, because through that, the CIA found out about that operation, and the CIA actually placed a listening bug inside the house itself, but they couldn't listen to the incoming phone calls, and they asked, and Scheuer actually went to the NSA's signals director, Barbara McNamara, and they got into a pretty much of a tiff there. And McNamara said, if you do anything to compromise the operation, I'll make sure I go straight to the director and basically, have you, I guess, in trouble or fired or whatever. But it didn't matter because 99 Scheuer is replaced with Richard Blee anyway. So, I mean, the CIA and the NSA basically hoarded information. According to Thomas Drake, the NSA just hoarded information and didn't act on it. And according to him, he basically says that the NSA had basically shared this information with the FBI and competing agencies, that they alone, with this information alone by them, could have stopped 9/11 altogether. And I said, I basically couldn't ask him further than that because the information is classified, whatever they collected. And I said, if maybe somewhere down the line, I thought of an idea of filing a FOIA regarding the transcripts collected from those lines. And nobody's ever thought about doing that. I can only imagine what they've uncovered. It's a shame, Seth, because we can armchair quarterback all we want here and basically say, the CIA and the NSA, they all, failed us and, what information they collected and whatnot. But that's neither here nor there. Now, what do we do with the current process? You wrote extensively on the trials themselves. You're one of the few people, besides Carol Rosenberg of the New York Times and, of course, Dan Christensen, Florida Bulldog. Right now, God's sakes, what is it, 22 years now? These guys are languishing in there. Are we going to see a trial, Seth?
Oh, boy. I think they have to bring this to a conclusion somehow. I don't know if we're ever going to see a trial or we'll see a plea or something, but I don't know. I don't know is the short answer to your question. But I think that there's enough pressure now to bring this kind of thing to an end. It's gone on just too long. And now all the secrets have been revealed there. I think that's, something as a journalist, people don't really pay attention. Carol Rosenberg does, a few people do. But, if you can mine, it's all public record, all the transcripts, all the motions that have been filed. And, that's how I found this story that we're talking about here. There's other things out there that people just have not really bothered to pay much attention to. There's revelations about the interrogation program. There's all kinds of, stories in there that are kind of a gold mine for reporters. And it just, you started out by asking me like, what, why don't other people pay attention? I don't understand it. I God bless Carol Rosenberg, but most news organizations aren't devoting any resources to that. And, it is a great, we still will never learn the full truth until people start investigating.
Yeah, I'm in denial. So let's just put it that way. I'm in denial because I couldn't believe, going back to the Canestraro document, I said, my God, this is a damning file. And it's, of all these old medias, let me rant a little bit here because I'm still mad. So these old media types, these big platforms, they love to say that, we want a change of government and it starts with the CIA and the NSA and the, these agencies and whatnot. Well, okay, here you have a Canestraro document that basically says they looked at, and by the way, this is coming from people at the FBI, even within the CIA, one of them being John Kiriakou, congressional officials, all looked at classified material. And here you have it, a CIA black operation on U.S. soil with Saudi intelligence about 2 known al-Qaeda operatives, and basically ran files on some of these Saudi operatives that go back years. Okay, we have the director of operations, James Pavitt. You have the director, the DCI, George Sennett. We can start really putting feet to the fire and basically say we can get these people in trouble. No, we don't. And basically, not only that, we're just not going to report it at all, even though it exists out into the manosphere, the universe sphere here. But yeah, God bless Carol Rosenberg. God bless yourself, Seth Hettena. You're one of the few people that wrote about it. You. I want to go back in time because you brought up something about this recruitment process at the CIA. In 1999, the CIA tasked Cofer Black, who's the head of the Counterterrorism Center, and he was surprised that there were no moles or informants inside Al Qaeda. So he came up with an outline called the Plan. It's a real catchy headline, where he wanted to get informants inside Al Qaeda, and this is the basis for the idea to get al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi as assets for Al Qaeda and within the CIA and through Saudi intelligence. However, there's a problem, and you mentioned this, and I had to laugh. Nawaf al-Hazmi, Khalid al-Mihdhar, suspected Omar al-Bayoumi as a Saudi spy to a man who, by the way, was an FBI informant himself in Abdussadah Sheikh, who rented 2 rooms to the 2 men. So if that is the case, wouldn't that bring the CIA operation compromised, so to speak? Because now you have these 2 guys who suspected al-Bayoumi. By the way, al-Bayoumi just made it obvious because he walks around with a camera and just films everybody. And, people even knew, like, how does he get a monthly stipend? This guy doesn't work. And it really just made it obvious. And, wasn't even, careful about it.
Yeah.
If al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi suspected him as a Saudi spy, they weren't going to get much anyway. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, this guy was like Inspector Clouseau. It was just pretty obvious that he was doing something for the Saudi government, because he had a job that he never went to. He was here on a student visa and he didn't attend classes. He walked around with a video camera, videotaping everything all the time. And he just and then he also had access to huge sums of money. Through him, there was a mosque here in I live in San Diego. There was a mosque here that was funded. And that was where his office was. So people like that, I've never run into a person like that. Maybe that happens more in Saudi Arabia than it does here. But you're just like, either this guy is a trust fund baby or he's, working for the government in some way and just has access to unlimited resources. So, again, this goes back to like the kind of amateurish nature that you're pointing out here. A CIA, like in the Near East division, they would have their own contacts in Saudi Arabia. They would be able to assess, okay, is this al-Bayoumi guy? Is he, who is he? What is he? Is he trustworthy? They had their, as you pointed out, they had their own paper on him. They could do their own reading and research and figure out, okay, this guy's a clown. He's not trustworthy. But the Alex Station people, who are mostly analysts, might not have had that same level of knowledge and might be more willing to trust it and take a risk because they see, the Near East, our other colleagues in the Near East division of Langley aren't doing anything. We're going to jump in here and we're going to take action. And that's the catastrophe here. But you brought up a couple other things about something that also jogged my memory is, this document, all this information is laid out in a document by Don Canestraro, as you mentioned. He's a DEA agent, former DEA agent, who works as an investigator for the defense at Guantanamo. And he spent years doing all this work, and he produced a document that he wrote specifically to be unclassified. And on the document at the bottom, it says unclassified. But when it hit the Guantanamo docket, the whole thing, except for that unclassified marking, was blacked out. So, that's another, in fairness to the US media here, someone is playing games with security there and is, keeping sensitive information out of the public eye, even though, when I spoke to Don, he's like, that's unclassified. You can have it. There's no reason why you can't. And, that's how I got it,
let's talk about that too. You covered the trial. which, by the way, has been rife with interference from the CIA and from the U.S. government itself, and for a good measure, because now we're getting close to, touching on things that could get them in trouble. Or in your article, you're entitled "Yet Another Delay in Saudi-Related 9/11 Docs Case," you wrote about Air Force Colonel Judge Matthew McCall, who's overseeing the prosecution of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 3 other defendants. By the way, the other defendant, Ramzi bin Al-Shib, was declared mentally unfit. I don't know how they all weren't declared mentally unfit, because they all were extensively tortured. But he has been the 4th or 5th judge assigned to the case. And that's, stunning. It's been over 20 years now, and we're still in pre-trial hearings. Right. And basically, you brought up a point. I totally forgot about this. I'm glad you did. Yes, there was a compromise of sorts. Use that term lightly. That the Biden administration made a deal with the lawyers of the defendants and basically said, we will basically take the death penalty off the table if they plead guilty across the board. And Seth, I want to get your thoughts here, because my fear went up to my throat. And I said, oh my God, if this deal happens, we will probably never know in our lifetime what the government had and didn't have in regards to prosecuting these men. Is that a thought you share, or could you expand on that?
100%. I mean, I have the same thought. And I think, given the way the government operates, I quite honestly think that's the most likely scenario is there, the defense is constantly pushing to get these secrets out in the open. They've gotten some of them out. We know a lot more now than we did before, but I think we're still only like the tip of the iceberg here. And I just think that the government will have to make a choice at some point. Do we want a public trial where all this information is laid out about how these men were interrogated and whether they were tortured, whether they weren't tortured, and are they suffering from all these issues that are being raised in Guantanamo? Knowing the way the government operates and I just think the plea is probably the most likely scenario here.
They, I spoke with Ken Williams, who's a former FBI agent out of Phoenix, that wrote the infamous Phoenix memo. Yep. And he claimed, and he's been periodically going down to Guantanamo. And when I interviewed him, I asked him, I said, what are your thoughts regarding any future proceedings and trial? He goes, oh, trial. He goes, no, it is 2 years ago. He swore up and down the board that no, there won't be a trial. They'll break, because what they don't want is what you just brought up, Seth. They don't want the secrets to come out, because it'll show that all of these men, whether they were telling the truth, by pleading guilty across the board, can you really believe it? Right. Can you really believe it? And he goes, the most damning thought would be that whatever evidence they had, or it'll be just locked away in the National Archives for the next 30, 40 years, and we'll never know what they didn't have. And that's why I asked that question. That's the real fear about all this. And I think also added to that, there was a promise that they would be actually sent to jails outside the United States, and that would close Guantanamo Bay. Or the other scenario would be that they'll live out the rest of their lives at Guantanamo, and then when they die, they'll close it or whatever. You wrote also too that the federal government, along with the CIA, have basically made this case almost impossible to prosecute. And with the SEER program, that's the name of the program that these 2 CIA contractors, Bruce Jessen and James Mitchell, which was approved by the White House legal counsel, John Yoo, David Attenborough, and Alberto Gonzalez, that they approved and signed off by, the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, that the White House approved torture methods to extract these confessions. But my problem here is, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, is that the CIA said, they had to have known that when they got these confessions, they couldn't be used in a court of law, that the charges wouldn't stick. So, Seth, why did they torture them in the first place?
Why did they torture them in the first place? Because it's human nature. Because when a country, and what we've been talking about, CIA's the first line of defense here. They're humiliated by the 9/11 attacks. They're furious, and quite honestly, they wanted revenge, and there was all this talk of the gloves have come off, and the eagle is sharpening its talons, and Dick Cheney's comment, we're going to have to go to the dark side, and there was all this talk and pressure being put on the CIA and the Defense Department and the military to just go and fuck these people up and find out what's going on. And that is human nature. It's happened in warfare since from the beginning of time, and it will happen again. And they tortured them because they convinced themselves that they needed special rules, and they were above the law, and the laws didn't apply to these people. And that's why I think there won't be a trial, because they went atavistic. They went to their animal instincts, and that's kind of my answer.
Yeah, by the way, that's a very interesting answer, Seth, because that's similar to what Ken Williams told me. And because I asked him this question, why did they torture in the first place? And Ken Williams said, similar to what you said, he goes, well, that James Mitchell was a very egotistical man.
Yeah.
Basically saw himself as a hero of sorts by extracting revenge on the behalf of the people.
Yeah.
And he wrote, and he testified, in these pretrial hearings that if even afterwards, after all this came out, he goes, he would do it again.
Yeah.
And that just told me right there that, probably what you just said is probably the truth, that they were extracting revenge on these people. But Seth, again, by doing this, it ruined the case.
Yeah.
I mean, it ruined the case. And this is, a magnificent fuck up of sorts. I'm sorry to curse, but of epic proportions. And, that's really self-serving, Seth, right? I mean, for them to do this.
Yeah.
All right. So
can I just jump in here?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, that Carol Rosenberg had, who we keep mentioning her. If people don't know, she writes for the New York Times and she covers Guantanamo exclusively. She reported a story just last week that when they were considering federal prosecutions, not the military prosecutions that are going on now in Guantanamo, but federal prosecutions of the 9/11 defendants, their statements were unusable because of the torture issue. And the prosecution had made that decision. The military's made a different decision that these statements are usable. So that's what this fight is all about, and why torture has become such an issue there. If your case hinges on a statement that was obtained from a defendant who was, waterboarded 83 times or whatever it was, yeah, you're going to have problems, and you're probably not going to get to trial,
Yeah. By the way, Khaled Sheikh Mohammed was waterboarded 183 times. That's
Right.
just absurd number itself. I mean, really, when you think about it, like 183 times. When I read that, by the way, when I read that in the CNN article many years ago, I said, well, they weren't torturing him to get a confession. They were torturing him to get him to confess to crimes all across the board, basically. It's almost like that. But, I mean, there was a story, funny thing, there was a story that Alfreda Ambakowski, who was one of the heads of the Alex station as a CIA analyst, you bring up, there's a weird culture there. I agree. Anthony Schaefer would later nickname them the Manson family because they were made up of women, and they swore loyalty to Scheuer, created this really a shell within a shell, because Alex Station was a very covert group, and Scheuer created this like cultish mentality there that were loyal to him. But nevertheless, here you have a lead analyst who actually took off time from work to go and watch Khalid Sheikh Mohammed being waterboarded. And Khalid Sheikh Mohammed saw the woman, and he was naked, and he objected to her being there, not being objected to the waterboard himself, because he basically was expecting to be tortured, and he would count on his hands how many seconds it would take and stuff. And, basically that, he was brutally tortured. And it's amazing to me that they labeled, and this was just reason, they said that Ramzi bin al-Shibh was unfit to stand trial. I said, all right, what's stopping from the rest of the four? And if you read the torture methods that were used on people like Mustafa al-Hassawi, who can't sit on a chair and basically has to have a pillow because they anally raped him with a device that was like a Brillo pad up his. I said, it's amazing with the horrible stories these people went through. And meanwhile, I know they're murderers, right? But on top of it, do you have to become the monster to basically, get confessions from a monster?
Well, yeah.
Why did they label all of them mentally unfit?
Well, do you have to become a monster to interrogate a monster? That's a great question. There's a great book written, France, when it occupied Algeria after World War II, that was kind of the first real kind of window into this world that we're living in now of counter-terrorist operations, and how do you suppress like a terrorist network. And the French went in, and they were brutal. They were brutal. And there's a great novel about it. It's called The Centurions by Jean Lartaguy or something like that. Fantastic book. And he really explores these issues of what happens when a society is attacked. And really one of the kind of main themes is the real culprits here are the American people. We were angry, we were hurt, we were attacked, and we wanted revenge. And the soldiers felt that, and the CIA felt that, and they were doing what they felt the American people wanted them to do. And then when the shit hit the fan, then the subpoenas and the court cases and all this stuff. And that's exactly what happened to France too. And it's happened multiple times. But we really need this is all about what a civil society does in the time of war. And everyone, I was certainly like just furious after 9/11 and grief-stricken, and it was horrific. And the soldiers were carrying what they thought were the wishes of the American people into battle, and the CIA was too. That's an important lesson I think we need to kind of reflect on.
Yeah, and basically, it's an interesting conundrum, right? Because you're facing the people that changed the world, basically, through a very expansive and complex terrorist act. And then when you look at it, Seth, I'll become personal here with you, is that, I've studied the events of September 11th for 16 years, and I poured over tens of thousands of documents. And, I'm the only, I think, active podcast that lasted over 5 years. And, when you look at all the pre-intelligence information that's declassified, and when you realize that you had a number of agencies, foreign and domestic, that basically were here inside the United States, that collected massive amounts of data. And some of these people became whistleblowers and tried to warn their superiors, people like Mark Rossini, people like Ken Williams, people like Colin Rowley, Robert Wright Jr., Thomas Drake, who, in my opinion, one of the biggest whistleblowers in my lifetime, basically warned of an impending attack inside the United States. And for some reason, I'm not going to make a charge and say Bush wanted 9/11. That's infantile and juvenile and without merit.
Right.
But it makes you wonder, had they acted on this information, had these people just, stricter security measures at, say, INS, the immigration, coming from, because the Saudis had the Visa Express program that rushed in people with incomplete applications to get, a visa. Had they acted on this information, could have stopped 9/11, but they didn't. And what I think bothers most people, Seth, is that after these two congressional investigations, which were very incomplete, didn't report on everything, stifled by, Philip Zelikow, the CEO of 9/11 Commission, and the Joint House Inquiry under Hill, I forgot her name. What this did was basically give almost like a pass to certain people in these agencies. Tenet got the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Yeah.
And he lied in the 9/11 Commission about, nobody reading the cable concerning al-Midar and al-Hazmi. Seth, I'm going to make a very, resounding question to you, put you in the hot seat here. I'm sorry to do it, but I really would get your opinion because, I consider you an expert in these fields. What type of, can we trust these agencies going forward if something like similar to this were to ever happen again?
Well, I mean, we need a CIA. We need an intelligence agency. We need to know what our enemies are doing. And it would be stupid to not have one, to just assume that everyone has good intentions and there aren't bad people in the world. But let me make a couple of points. I've written about intelligence a lot, and there's kind of a field of knowledge called intelligence studies, and one of these is a guy named Richard Betts, I think his name is, and he wrote about he looked at Pearl Harbor very closely. Pearl Harbor was also a screw up. There was intelligence in the pipeline that could have stopped Pearl Harbor. And the conclusion there was intelligence in the pipeline that could have stopped the 1972 surprise attack on Israel that was ignored. There was intelligence, a surprise attack succeeds in large part because evidence is ignored. That there's always because our intelligence networks are so vast and so comprehensive, there's always going to be things in the pipeline that could have been put together. There's always going to be, dots that could have been connected. What my story is to take that a level deeper. And this wasn't just a case of missing dots. And I think to just let me put a pin in your question here. I think in a future 9/11, the next surprise attack, whatever that, there is going to be another surprise attack someday. We don't know what it is, obviously, because it's a surprise. But when that happens, I'm pretty sure that an investigation will find that there was evidence that was pointing to what happened and could have been put together and deciphered. But my story is a level deeper, that the CIA had a clear opportunity to jump in and stop it at an early stage. And they blew it. And they're not answering questions about why. They just kind of write it off as information was lost. And that is, that to me is deeply disturbing. But to be honest with you, it happens all the time in military operations and intelligence operations. It happens all the time that people cover their asses and people hide their mistakes and hand out medals. I just wrote a story about this in the Navy SEALs. Again, we're dealing with human nature here. And, we have to have good oversight of our military and our intelligence. It's the only way, you're gonna assure that people are just not hiding everything. It has to be aggressive, really serious, hard looks at what the intelligence community is doing. And unfortunately, I just don't think that happens enough. It happens after a surprise attack, after a catastrophe, and then it goes away.
Seth,
Sorry, man. I wish I had a better answer for you.
No, listen. I mean, I was just going to follow up with that, but Seth, you can understand how like conspiracy theories can abound from that, right?
Of course.
Because I'm inundated, Seth, and this is where I go nuts. I'm very careful with putting out information out there and fact checking, and and I'm speaking, to the choir here, regarding information. Getting information is hard, but fact checking and looking, to see if it's valid and reasonable through the scientific method is a time consuming and very meticulous. But that's how you build a reputation. But you can understand how conspiracy theories can abound for me, because I get people that basically tell me that Israel or Saudi Arabia or the CIA wanted this to happen,
right?
To basically take advantage of the benefits of what happened. In some respects, is it ludicrous? I mean, I'm not going there because I won't make a charge unless I have information, because I treat it like I'm going to court. What you believe, I don't care what you believe. I want to know what you know, right? It's more important. But yeah, at the same time, Seth, you can understand how even rabid conspiracy theories can abound from here. It's all about the trust issue. And, you mentioned about, having oversight. And Thomas Drake, he went, he gave closed door testimony to the House Oversight Committees and basically said that, it's not like the NSA didn't know. Like, for example, he went to Maureen Baginski, the head of the Signals Directorate, after 9/11, and he gave her a CD, which basically had a number of CDs, and basically had all the data the NSA had collected on Bin Laden and Al Qaeda. And he told her this. And the first thing she says is come from Thomas Drake, quote unquote, "Tom, I wish you hadn't shown me that."
Wow. And
basically what this meant was that now the NSA does not have plausible deniability. And that's what they were worried about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a really telling and a very real story, that, I wish to your point about the conspiracy theories, 100%. And I think part of the reason why we are where we are today is we've never really resolved these traumas of 9/11 and the Iraq War, and then just the intelligence failure after intelligence failure here. And that gave room for a politician to come in and say, I don't believe the intelligence community. And then, find maybe not a majority, but a lot of Americans agree. And that's a dangerous thing. And that's given our adversaries a huge opening here to just flood us with conspiracies and disinformation, that they're probably not even creating, but just repeating, just broadcasting, that come from an Alex Jones type person or somebody like that. And, we are in a dangerous place now. And so, we're gonna the 9/11 is very much with us, because we are living in this world of post-truth, of disinformation, and it's not going to get better anytime soon.
Seth, I've been a huge fan of SpyTalk and your work, and I commend you. Really, thank you very much for what you've been able to broadcast. I wish, one of the hidden crimes of 9/11. I brought this up in a video the other day. I wish we had many more people reporting on this, but we could be very fortunate that we have people like yourself and Carol Rosenberg and Dan Christensen of Florida Bulldog. Seth, what are you working on currently? I mean, I want people to know your work. So what are you working on?
Man. So I write a lot about the Navy SEALs. I just mentioned I did a story about Lone Survivor. People may remember that movie and book about these SEALs that were ambushed. Again, that people should check out that story. There's a lot of myths that got created there to cover things up too. And I'm trying to work to kind of expose these things. There are some people in the SEAL community who are trying to help me do that. So that's what I've been working at. I have a Substack called the Iceman, which you can find just Googling around for the Iceman and my last name, which is Hettena. And the more people that read and join, the more work I can do in this area.
I'm going to link all that in the description of this podcast. Seth Hettena, freelance journalist, contributing editor of Rolling Stone, SpyTalk, has written extensively about the CIA, the FBI, and the Guantanamo pretrial hearings. And I don't recommend many people, and that's like I said, it's a hidden crime, 9/11. But Seth Hettena is one of the few that I would absolutely recommend. He's been covering the story ad nauseum and basically is a reputable source. And Seth, I've been wanting to get with you in a while, some hiccups along the way. Really, thank you very much for coming on and talking with us today.
Thanks for having me, Adam. I enjoyed the conversation, and kudos. I appreciate what you're doing. Very few people stay with a story for a long time, but when you do, you see all the layers and levels and complexities, and you become an expert. And it just, you are providing a service with your depth of knowledge just by staying with it, and because everyone else is forgetting. And, by staying with it, you're not letting people forget. And you're always a reminder of, why this is important. And it will forever be important. Just like Pearl Harbor will always be important. And I commend you for that.
Well, no, thank you. I consider, myself just a messenger. And, my fear is that, I don't want people to remember me specifically. I want people to remember the information in the hopes of basically in the future. And I want other people to branch out and make this story, more popular than what it should be now. And that's what I'm hoping for with people like yourself and others. I'm usually a hopeless pessimist, but in this case, I'm an optimist. And Seth, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks, Adam.